In this video, we're going to look at the top 5 most common questions that are asked in Aldi interviews, and I'm going to help you plan fantastic answers that will get you hired by Aldi. So let's start with a question that they are extremely interested in knowing the answer to, and that is, what shifts can you do at Aldi? And they will make their hiring decision to a large extent on your answer to this question. If you answer it badly, you will simply not get the job. So the keys to success is 3 things. Firstly, you want to show that you're going to meet the business's needs, that you're actually going to be there at the times that they need staffing. You're going to show that you're highly flexible, and you're going to demonstrate that you're committed to the job. This question actually screens out people that are showing a weak commitment and are not taking the job seriously. And I'm going to mention in a second some times where you should specifically mention. The way that people screw this up, however, is that they simply list all of the times that they can't do. And that is not very helpful. That is just giving reasons not to hire you. So you simply do not mention any times that you can't do because you don't want to be volunteering reasons not to hire you. The times that you should definitely mention, and the times that Aldi are looking out for, are weekends where the stores are slightly more busy and staff ideally would rather have the weekend off, but that's not, of course, possible. Store opening time early in the morning. So if you're an early riser, that's a great thing to get in your interview. And also towards the closing time when it's late, a lot of people ideally would have liked to have finished work, but if you're happy to work at that time, definitely mention it. If you have the capacity to work in holidays, particularly school holidays, that's a great time to mention. If you can't work those times, again, keep with the philosophy of not mentioning the times that you can't do because they shouldn't ask specifically about school holidays, but it is useful to mention if you can do that. And lastly, a great phrase to get in there that hiring managers and store managers really like to hear is that you are happy to work to meet the business's needs. And that's very reassuring that you're showing a lot of flexibility and you're going to be there when they need you. So get that phrase in at the end if you can. Fundamentally, you want to show that you've got a can do attitude. So by saying yes to as much as possible and volunteering a wide variety of times and not being overly fussy and choosy about particular times, you're showing that you're taking the job seriously and that this job is actually high up your priorities list. And there isn't an enormous list of things that are getting in the way of you being able to do your job. So let's move on to the next question, which is, what can you tell me about Aldi? And Aldi is a very interesting business with a very storied history that you should do some research on. So if you are asked this question, you want to show that you've got really an encyclopedic knowledge and you've actually went away and done your research. So start by looking at the fundamentals about how Aldi actually works, because it works very, very differently to a lot of other retailers. Aldi's focus is on being extremely efficient in delivering the product to the consumer at a very attractive price point by taking out a lot of the wastage and expense in that process. So you'll see things like the stacking of the shelves in Aldi doesn't have individual products. They are all stacked in boxes, and that staff are expected to do multiple jobs. So they will be stacking shelves and they could be working on the tills. And so they are worked very hard. And the stores also have slightly lower staffing levels, which reduces costs, but also leads to the higher wages that are available at Aldi. You should be aware that Aldi has a very limited range. So instead of stocking an enormous number of the same thing, for example, having 30 different brands of jam, which if you go into many of the competitors, you'll see that there are very large selections of the same product. Aldi massively cuts that down to focus on only a small number of each product, which massively reduces the complexity of the supply chain, and those savings are passed on to the consumer, making Aldi very competitive. You should know a little bit about the history. So you've got Carl and Theo Albrecht were the founders. They were two brothers, and they split the company into two companies. So you got Aldi North and Aldi South, basically, and they split up territories between them. So Aldi is in fact two different companies, and in the United States, Aldi Nord trades as Trader Joe's, and then the other version of Aldi is known as Aldi. So there is actually two companies there, and you should be aware of that. You should check which of the two companies you're applying to so that you can tailor your answers towards the particular part of Aldi that you're applying to. You should definitely know the revenue and profit numbers. You should know who the chief executive is, and you should know the key facts about the company that I'm sharing on this slide. A great fact to definitely get in there is where the name Aldi comes from. That's a really fundamental fact. That comes from Albrecht discount. So Albrecht is the name of the family that founded it, and then discount, you take the AL and the DI from those two words, and you get Aldi. So some other tips that I'll give you is to read Aldi's CR report. That's the corporate social responsibility report. And if you Google that, you will find that report, and it's got a lot of great facts about the company in there. So definitely take some time to read that and know all of the things on these slides, and you'll be well prepared for your interview when this question comes up. And you can drop a lot of this information throughout your interview. So let's move on to number 3. Why do you want to work at Aldi? There's lots of things that you can mention. I've given you some suggestions on the right, but on the left, we've got some of the key points that you need to get in. So what is it that makes Aldi special? Some things you can think about is that they've got great career progression. The salaries at Aldi are very, very competitive. The wages are higher. They are delivering a great product at a very low price. They are saving a lot of people a lot of money. You can talk about your skills and experience. So if you've worked in grocery before and it's something you like, that is something that you should definitely get in there. If you like working with customers and you're going to be in a customer facing role, definitely mention something like that. Progression opportunities are quite good at Aldi. There is assistant manager, store manager, deputy manager, area manager, and then head office roles. So there is the chance to have a lifetime career. You're working for a family owned company, which is very different from working for a big corporation. You can also talk about your personal interests, for example, customer service. And the most important thing to be successful and why do you want to work at Aldi is you have to be enthusiastic. If you're not showing any enthusiasm in the answer, then it makes you question whether you really do want to work there. Some other things that you can get in there are employee recommendations. So if someone who already works there has got lots of positives to say, you can share in their enthusiasm for the company. You can talk about its rapid growth. So there's a chance to grow with the company. And then the last thing you can talk about is brand affinity. So if you really like the Aldi brand, that could be something that attracted you to working there. So if you get all of those ideas in and as many of those things on the right, then you're going to score highly on this question as long as you show some enthusiasm. So let's look at question 4. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? And there's some key ideas to get in there. You want to start with something that is credible. If you're applying to an entry-level job, in 5 years' time, you are probably not going to be an area manager running a whole set of stores. That is not normal progression, and it comes across as not particularly credible. You want to show some planning, that you've actually thought about it, but not just where you want to be in 5 years, but what you need to do to earn that promotion, for example, or what you need to do now to get there. And importantly, you have to talk about what Aldi has got to offer. So if you're looking at progression, what are the routes of progression? Look on LinkedIn. People who started there, what are they doing now? How long did it take them to get there? What training does Aldi have? So look up the most recent information on the training schemes by a simple Google search. So things you could talk about is the road to +1. It is reasonable and credible to make one level of progression in 5 years. Many people will move faster than that, but it's not ridiculous to suggest one level of progression. So from working in the store to being an assistant manager is not an unreasonable step to take. So you can talk about what is the road to +1. So part of that is being amazing at your current job and then earning the right to move up. You could talk about just being amazing at your current role, that you're not interested in moving up. That's absolutely fine. So you talk about being outstanding and being someone that the leadership in that store looks to as a role model within that role. And maybe you'll take on some training of new staff as someone who is very good at their job. But you should also mention that you want to build a reputation, that throughout those 5 years, you want a reputation of being reliable, of being highly efficient at their job, and being great at customer service. So you're going to develop that reputation before you even think about progression. On the other hand, there's certain things that are going to screw up the interview. So anything that's absurd, so going from an entry level job to an area manager in 5 years, that's not reasonable. And it's slightly insulting to the interviewer. So if you're thinking about the person is interviewing as a store manager and you're suggesting that you're going to get to their level extremely quickly or you're going to overtake them, then that doesn't come across very well. And really, you don't want to mention anything that's not relevant to Aldi. So going somewhere else or anything that doesn't involve your job in 5 years' time, like buying a house, starting a family. These are not things that are appropriate for an interview, so don't mention them. The worst thing you can say is leaving Aldi. What is the point of investing time, effort, and energy in training and upskilling and investing in someone, and in fact, just hiring them if they're going to leave? So if you're just saying in your interview that you want to move to a different city in 5 years' time, or you want to go to university or college in 5 years' time, that is the wrong time to mention it in a hiring interview. That's absolutely the wrong time. So get as many of the things on the positive arrow, avoid all the things on the negative arrow, and pick a story about either being amazing at your current role or the road to +1, and you should score well on this question. So let's look at question 5 before we look at some questions that you can ask them. So you've got a customer is returning an item, or you've got some sort of disagreement with the customer, and you are asked about what you will do. So the example we're taking is disagreeing with the returns policy, and you have to think about how you would handle this. And you can use a similar answer to questions about an angry customer, questions about a customer complaint. It's all basically the same procedure. So for any negative experience with a customer, you're going to use de-escalation. You've got to calm the situation down, you've got to get it under control, and you've got to maintain a positive, happy store environment for all of the customers. Then you have to show some empathy, that you're actually listening to the customer's problem and that you are working with them, that you are really on their side and you're trying to help them out. But you must reassure the hiring manager or the store manager that you are going to stick to their policy, that you're not going to accept a return if that customer is not allowed to have a return. So you're going to know what the policy is and you're going to stick to it. So for any question around returns policies or around dealing with customer complaints or angry customers, it's all about de-escalation, empathy, and following the policies, and you'll be successful in this question. So let's finish with the questions once I make one thing very clear. Any time you're dealing with a customer, in a negative sense, you must reassure them in the interview that you'll never shout back and you're always going to remain calm. That is very important to mention. So let's look at some questions to ask them. So definitely ask them about the team you're going to be working with. Show some interest in your colleagues. The next question I suggest is ask them what the best thing about working about Aldi is, and they will tell you what they like about the job, and so show some interest in that and link that to your reasons to want to work there and be really positive, enthusiastic about it. A good question to show that you're really committed and you're really serious is to ask them what you can do now to be really well prepared, and then commit there and then at the interview to doing that before you start. Make that commitment to go an extra step and use your own time to be super prepared. And another clever question that you can ask is, what does an amazing Aldi employee look like? What should an employee do to be absolutely amazing? And then when the manager tells you what they look for in a great employee, you can make some commitments to doing that and link that to your skills, experience, and some examples that you've brought up in the interview to show that you demonstrate a lot of what they are looking for. And lastly, you have to mention one question that comes up in your head throughout the interview. So when they are asking you questions, think about something that comes up in the interview, form a question, take a mental note, and ask that question at the end to show that you're listening and engaging in a two-way conversation. So I wish you the best of luck in your Aldi interview, and thank you very much for watching.